Let me say first that I'm really pleased to be here today. UNCTAD 15 being hosted by the government of Barbados, the first time by a small state, by a small island developing state, and by a member of the Caribbean community. I am more than pleased. I am truly proud. And I have to say that the arrangements on the ground here are impeccable. The surroundings are beautiful, and the hospitality is warm and exceptionally Barbadian. So I'm really happy to be here. This meeting provides an opportunity to highlight to the global community the issues and concerns of our grouping, the small island and low-lying coastal development states, and to identify some of the measures that can be taken by the international community to support our efforts to build resilience and to promote sustainable development. SIDS experienced contraction in 2020 at about 3 times the global rate. The devastation to the health systems and to economic activity meant that at exactly the same time that we needed to be able to address the health emergency, our economies and public finances contracted sharply. So we did the best we could. We applied funds that were budgeted to meet other purposes, to meet the needs of the health sector for PPEs, for medical equipment, testing supplies, vaccines. We shifted funds within our budgets to meet basic social safety nets. We repurposed loans and borrowed additional funds. Already high debt burdens grew higher. What has been the response of the international community? The G20 Debt Service Suspension Initiative, which allowed developing countries to temporarily suspend debt service payments to their official bilateral creditors, that's set to expire in December 2021. While this program had potential, it does not cover all middle to high income developing countries, many of which are SIDS. It also does not include private creditors, so that severely limits the potential of its impact. 40% of the developing countries received a credit downgrade in 2020. Furthermore, the new debt arising from the need to address the COVID crisis, together with the existing debt stock, will continue to appropriate significant portions of public resources in debt repayments. This will strangle the ability of our countries to undertake critical public infrastructure investments, which are required for economic rehabilitation. An effective response to this must include significant and broad debt reduction for all developing countries, including vulnerable middle to high income states. Debt reduction should specifically address the buildup due to COVID and due to climate change adaptation. Many SIDS can no longer access multilateral and bilateral concessional funding because of their relative high per capita. We've talked about this a lot. With the reality of our vulnerabilities exposed by the COVID and climate crises, the call for a more appropriate basis for determining access to concessional financing takes on even greater urgency. We have to continue to press for the implementation of the multidimensional vulnerability index. We therefore call on the UN system to intensify collaboration with relevant regional institutions, particularly in the Caribbean, the Pacific, and the Indian Ocean, to make this index a reality. Additionally, we call on the IMF, the World Bank, as well as bilateral and multilateral development partners to step away from the blinders of GDP per capita and apply what we learn in Development Economics 101, that GDP per capita cannot be a measure of development, let alone sustainable development. Resource mobilization for rehabilitation, adaptation, and building resilience remains a priority for CARICOM. The new IMF SDR allocation of $650 billion is a step towards providing additional liquidity to the global financial system. CARICOM member states are likely to receive about 1.7 billion, which is about 1/3 of the funding boost initially projected for the recovery of CARICOM states. The call by the IMF Managing Director for countries with strong external positions to channel some of their SDRs to countries which need them most. The pledges already made to expand the resources under the IMF's Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust, and the proposals to challenge SDRs to support structural transformation in vulnerable countries, either through the establishment of a new resilience and sustainability trust or some other form of multilateral development bank initiative. These are all welcome. However, until these new options are developed, multilateral support is on the basis of the same policy menu traditionally and funding instruments that have been used to handle economic imbalances in the past. That menu does not adequately address our inherent vulnerabilities and fragilities, and will certainly be inadequate as a foundation for the design of recovery models that can build transformative and resilient economies in the face of global climate change. As we prepare for COP26, we welcome the recent re-engagement of major players and the commitments to meaningful reduction of CO2 emissions. It is vital that these be honored in order to limit global warming to 1.5 C. For SIDS like us in the CARICOM, 1.5 to stay alive is more than a catchy slogan. It is an existential reality. Successfully addressing our acute vulnerabilities requires SIDS to continue to strengthen technical, financial, and institutional capacity to adapt to environmental and economic shocks caused by climate change. Pledges to the Green Climate Fund and the Adaptation Funds must be honored and indeed increased in order to ensure that the most vulnerable can adapt and survive. Procedures for access to these funds also need to be simplified. We therefore have to be focused on pushing COP26 to be decisive in order to keep the pathways to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement alive and translating commitments to real action on the ground. COVID-19 is indeed a game changer, but the policy landscape for building resilient economies demands a willingness to think differently, and it requires innovative and transformative actions to address global inequality and drive inclusive growth.